Sullivan is riding a bicycle along the streets of Paris but makes a stop to pick up something before continuing his ride. He arrives at the home of his beloved girlfriend, Camille, who is a beautiful young lady in her teens and deeply in love with Sullivan. She is in bed, covered sparsely by a duvet. Sullivan picks a long branched flower and places it by Camille's side. She then caresses the flower and puts it in a little vase close to the bed. Camille mentions cutting her hair, but Sullivan warns her against doing such, stating she risks losing him if she dares do so. She infers that leaving her would resort to them losing their lives by her. She states, categorically, if he did leave, she would end Sullivan's life afterwards. They share a passionate kiss, after which Sullivan reassures her of his love for her. After a while, Sullivan leaves Camille's apartment with Camille seeing him off. Sullivan rides back to the apartment he shares with his parents and sibling. He picks up a very small painting belonging to his grandfather and slides it into his bag in a manner that means he is stealing it. He has a moment of fun with his brother and they make a ruckus. Sullivan's mom comes in and warns them to be careful to not disturb their father's peace. He goes over to his mom, who has piles of papers to sort out. He reveals to her his decision to drop out from the university. The mom dissuades him and gives him reasons why he shouldn't do that. He assures his mom dropping out is the best decision for him, as he plans to leave with Julian and Matthias to South America. The mom reckons his dad wouldn't like his decision and reminds him of the repercussions this decision will bring his way. It will cost him his studio and money for upkeep from the dad, but Sullivan remarks he has a plan. His mom inquires if Camille will make the trip with him and he states Camille won't be going along with them. Sullivan is seen wheeling some cartons while in the midst of friends and acquaintances. He tells one from the group his intentions to sell the painting he stole from his father's house. Now at the buyer's place, he mentions he's selling it to raise enough money for his travel. He further mentions his parents' potential outburst when they discover the painting's gone. Camille and Sullivan meet on the street to get lunch, and they share their routine passionate kiss. Camille reprimands Sullivan for not taking out time to see her during the week. He states he had a lot to do with Julian and Matthias. He goes on to say he was at a party where everyone was crazy about everyone except himself wanted to have carnal knowledge of each other. Camille wonders why he goes to these parties even though he assures her of not participating. Veering into their relationship, Sullivan remarks it's hard for him living without her. The fact they don't get to see every day breaks him. Camille refuses to fall for his antiques, as she's of the impression he would choose his friends over her. Camille expresses her displeasure, waiting for Sullivan while he refuses to show up. Sullivan suggests Camille goes out once in a while instead of waiting for him all the time. She disregards that and a mild argument ensues between them that vexes Sullivan. He decides to leave to avoid further quarrels as he feels Camille looks for ways to start quarrels. Camille is at her parents' house, helping her mum whilst chatting. Camille's mum senses her mood and tells her to cheer up, reminding Camille of her warnings to steer clear of relationships. The mum acknowledges the tears she sheds because of Sullivan, but Camille argues they are tears of joy. Camille's mum is concerned and hammers on Sullivan's lack of care for her. She tells her at 15 years of age, she's too young to worry about these kinds of relationships. Camille assures her mum Sullivan is the perfect choice for her. The mum retorts that Camille needs to make good use of her life. She begs her to have fun and do things girls her age would do, as she believes Camille is focused on the wrong person and thing. Camille insists what her mum sees as the wrong thing is what she's so much interested in. She says this with a lot of passion when they hear her dad walk in. The day unfolds with muted scenes of Camille navigating school until she returns home, her mood growing increasingly erratic. Nestling beside her father, her distress becomes apparent. Suddenly, she rushes to a nearby window, flinging it open to reveal Sullivan waiting outside. Their reunion is filled with palpable excitement as they embrace, even as they share a passionate kiss. Camille, relieved by Sullivan's presence, expresses her fears of abandonment after their recent disagreement. Sullivan, reaffirming his commitment, lavishes her with praise. With the door closed, they embrace once more, finding solace in each other's arms. Sullivan and Camille ride back to Sullivan's house. He then leads her upstairs and starts touching her, but Camille pulls away and says Sullivan isn't deserving of her body for now. She states the need for them to talk. Sullivan takes her words for granted and opines that they have said everything that needs saying, and hence, there's nothing more to share. Camille tries again to reject Sullivan's approach and offers an opportunity for them to do her homework instead. She tries to evade Sullivan when he catches her and pins her to the couch. He starts caressing her in all the right places, and Camille eventually gives in to him. Sullivan tells his friend the need to sell the painting so he won't get stranded when they travel. He meets up with a buyer for the painting. The buyer says the painting is a counterfeit and is worth very little. Sullivan receives the little it's worth and goes to pay for his ticket to South America. He branches off at a hat shop and gets one for Camille. Sullivan and Camille take a ride in the back of a truck out of town. They deem it a getaway trip to a country house in another part of the city. Sullivan goofs around the house with Camille opening the windows to allow ventilation. They take a walk around the house, then the compound, and get to an open stable. Camille gently strokes the face of the horse, and Sullivan climbs on the horse, helping Camille up too. They take the horse for a short ride with Camille leaning on Sullivan all the way. They explore the area by moving from one place to another, sighting a berry tree they pluck from. Sullivan lays on the grass with Camille laying on his chest. The place is calm. The trees and flowers enable gentle breeze to blow through and give them a relaxed ambience. This is all Camille wants, every time, with the love of her life. They go back to the country house, and Camille wants to cuddle and be intimate with Sullivan. He jokingly states Camille should do instead productive things like reading. Sullivan's stance doesn't last for a second as Camille goes over to him and initiates what she needs. Sullivan takes a bike and goes into town for shopping. While he makes a stop at a river to take a swim, Camille is back home wondering what is keeping Sullivan away. She's busy in the kitchen when she hears the sound of a broken glass at another part of the house. She takes caution only for a short while, but ultimately goes outside to wait endlessly for Sullivan, who isn't back yet. Sullivan comes back and meets a disgruntled Camille who questions his overdue stay outside. She hates being alone and he should know better. Her face reddens with anger and it's notable how much she's in her feelings. Sullivan tries to dissuade her but she reveals she can't trust him. She infers Sullivan takes her for granted, and the crux of her outrage is Sullivan's move to South America. She doesn't know what will become of her and her emotions when that happens. Sullivan manages to cheer her up. He makes her see reasons why they should learn to enjoy moments, experiences, and hold on to them. Camille reminds Sullivan he means everything to her, but Sullivan infers there's more to life than just loving someone and being with someone you love. Camille becomes scared of the unforeseen reality and breaks down in tears. She reiterates just how she wouldn't survive if Sullivan leaves. Sullivan becomes livid and bears his resentment for Camille's constant threats. He feels Camille's threats are harsh as opposed to Camille's view of him being the harsh one. Camille says Sullivan doesn't love her, which only aggravates him. He retorts that Camille's constant disbelief in his love tires him. He goes on to sound a note of warning. The next time Camille questions his love will be the end of what they share. With Camille already wailing, Sullivan announces he will be back in 10 months. They go back into the house into their separate rooms. Camille remains emotionally down. After a short while, Sullivan is almost done preparing a meal and calls Camille to come eat. She, however, loses interest in the meal and nuzzles up to Sullivan, who obliges her. After the meal, they take a trip to a rocky gorge. They have fun climbing the rocks and swimming through the river. They go back to town and the day Sullivan is to travel to South America comes. On his way to the airport, with Julian and Matthias, he makes a stop at Camille's house to bid her farewell, whom finds it hard to look at Sullivan's face because she's heartbroken. Sullivan leaves with Camille's mum wishing him a safe trip. She then consoles and cheers her daughter up, assuring time will heal whatever is broken in her. Camille is shown in class having lectures. After class, she heads over to her locker in the post room and finds Sullivan's letter there. The letter entails his journey on the road to South America. He states his discomfort of having to spend days and nights sleeping on the bus and writes that he misses her a lot. Camille got a map of South America on her wall, so every time a letter comes, she positions a pin on Sullivan's current location. As Camille goes about her school activities, she receives and reads a letter from Sullivan. In it, he confesses his fear of calling her, admitting that the sound of her voice when she's not physically around pains him deeply. He expresses concern about causing her future distress, believing she shares his sentiments. Sullivan then criticizes Camille's tendency to react strongly to minuscule issues, yet he reassures her of his unwavering love. As the days go by, Sullivan continues sending letters to Camille. He continuously informs her of his well-being and progress concerning the trip. She, however, misses him so much, and this makes her fall deeply into melancholy. On a particular day, she finds no letter in her post box. In the days to follow, Sullivan's letters no longer come in. Camille, ever determined, keeps checking the mailbox until she finds a letter many days later. Camille and her parents make a trip to their country home, and she reads the last letter Sullivan sent. Sullivan claims he's stranded somewhere, and the more he journeys, the less everything about Paris means to him. He states he is getting in touch with his actual self, but Camille is holding him back. He confers his desires to see them go their separate ways for her own good. She resumes school but finds it difficult to concentrate as she keeps daydreaming while classes go on. Realizing her relationship with Sullivan is hitting the rocks, she takes a stance and decides to forego her relationship with him. She starts by unpinning the last known locations of Sullivan from the map and takes the map off the wall entirely. She then takes a pill that lands her in the clinic, but her dad comes for emotional support. Months later, Camille decided to cut her hair short. She now works in a large clubhouse while still pursuing her studies in architecture. She also lives with her divorced mom, and through their conversations it is revealed Camille's dad has a new love interest. Where she studies, Camille's tutor gives an honest assessment of her project. The project demands Camille makes a design for student living, and she nods in acceptance of the assessment. The tutor notes Camille's project is suitable for hermitage and not for collective living. He likens the project to a monastery. For Camille, the project seems like a reflection of her inner self. Years are passing by and Sullivan's silence continues. But the silence no longer bothers Camille, or so she says in her diary entries. She takes solace in her job and finds someone interested in her. They spend a little time together, but Camille doesn't take much interest in him, refusing him access to her body. Another scene emerges with Camille in class for Lawrence's internship sessions where Lawrence faults the students' designs. He teaches them how they can use what he describes as the two implications of glimmer, light and darkness for architecture. Lawrence is properly introduced as a skilled architect. Camille finds herself closely observing Lawrence as he continues his lectures and practical sessions with the interns. Together, they embark on several field trips. On one of the field trips, Lawrence highly praises Camille and her new design. Lawrence then curiously asks why she chose architecture. She replies she isn't sure why, but she reckons her strong affinity for places. Lawrence states that in his case, architecture was never his first interest. He states he only got into architecture after an insoluble problem with his first interest. Lawrence confesses his chosen career path is too solitary for him, but he's fine and has no regrets about it. Lawrence takes his interns who are slowly becoming his team to a beach and tells them to savor the moment. At some point he accidentally finds Camille's diary and hands it over, but not without taking a sneak peek. Lawrence and Camille start developing a kind of fondness for themselves and become a couple soon after. Camille now has her own place and lives alone. One day, Lawrence comes over to pick her up for a date. While walking, Camille expresses displeasure. During their walk, Camille voices her dissatisfaction with Lawrence's reluctance to share details about his personal life. In response, Lawrence explains that he hesitates to burden her with his own struggles and discloses that he is in the midst of a divorce. Despite this revelation, Camille and Lawrence continue to spend a significant amount of time together, deepening their connection. In another scene, Lawrence is driving, with Camille sitting at the passenger's side. She claims the years before meeting Lawrence were nothing to write about. Lawrence interrupts and tells her every past is an important one. Much later at Lawrence's apartment, they share an affectionate glance that leads to an embrace and a passionate kiss. Lawrence takes his team to an abandoned building for inspection. Camille and Lawrence, fond of themselves, share ideas about the building. On their way back, while in the bus, Camille sees Sullivan's mum. She asks about Sullivan, and Sullivan's mum mentions Sullivan is presently in Paris. Camille takes a piece of paper and pens down her phone number. She hands it over to Sullivan's mum just in case Sullivan decides to say hi. Renovating begins in the building with Lawrence and his team handling it. Camille receives a text from Sullivan asking for a meetup. When they meet up, Camille finds it hard to express exactly how she feels. Sullivan reveals he lives in Marseille and only comes to Paris to see his family and friends. He mentions expressly he didn't come for Camille. He talks about his job as a photographer for the local press, and she updates him about her current job at the architectural firm. She also reveals she is moving in with her boyfriend soon. She asserts her relationship with Sullivan and the breakup that followed made her stronger, and Sullivan apologizes for how he left her. In response, Camille asks him if he's with someone currently. He confesses he just had a breakup and is now engaged in casual encounters. Sullivan then excuses himself, citing an appointment, and bids Camille farewell. Camille meets Lawrence where he's having a meeting with some people. She excuses Lawrence as she has urgent information to share with him. She confides in Lawrence about experiencing bleeding about an hour earlier, and they hurry to the hospital. On their arrival, they're told it's a miscarriage. Back at her residence, Lawrence provides comfort and support to Camille in her time of grief. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Camille praises Lawrence, declaring him a blessing in her life. Similarly moved, Lawrence expresses his deep affection for Camille, both of them shedding tears of pain together. Sullivan hurriedly comes to meet Camille at a park. She is visibly pissed that Lawrence took so much time and mentions she was ready to leave. Sullivan thanks her for staying and states he got caught up with work and lost track of time. They later go into a bar for some drinks, where Camille mentions her job as the project manager for the contract her firm runs. Sullivan expresses excitement and they celebrate with a couple of drinks. They eventually leave for Camille's house, but Sullivan doesn't escort her in. He hands her a photojournal and bids her goodnight. Camille and Sullivan's meetings become frequent and bold. Their current date is at a film house, the movie giving them a lengthy means of conversation. Sullivan thinks it's an awful movie, but Camille opposes the thought. The argument leaves them agreeing to disagree, opening their eyes to the reality that they don't agree on a lot of things. Camille states this phenomenon doesn't stop her from loving him. In honesty, she has no reasons as to why she can't stop loving Sullivan. Right there on the road, there's a moment of silence that ushers in a kiss with their hands all over the other person. Their faces merge so closely that one could think they depend on each other's breath for survival. The kiss ushers on for a while. After bidding farewell to Lawrence with a tight hug and a kiss, Camille meets up with Sullivan the same night. The forbidden couple share a kiss and hold hands as they walk together. Sullivan expresses doubt over the possibility of a lasting relationship with Camille, citing the challenges they face. However, Camille remains optimistic, pointing out they have the night to themselves in Lawrence's absence. As they cuddle for a moment, Sullivan is taken aback by Camille's eagerness. He voices concerns about the future, even if they decide to be together for the night. Same night, they check into a hotel. Inside the room, Camille sits on the bed as if waiting for Sullivan to come to her. Sullivan does exactly what she expects, caressing and kissing her. She gives in and allows Sullivan to undress her slowly. One night, Camille and Sullivan are spending time together in the building being renovated by Camille's firm. Camille arrives prepared, bringing along everything they might need for the night, including food for Sullivan, whom she notes often goes hungry after their intimate moments. As they settle in, Sullivan expresses his concerns about Camille's infidelity, but she remains indifferent to his concerns. Camille takes advantage of Lawrence's absence and invites Sullivan to the house she lives in with Lawrence. She welcomes him in and tells him they'll sleep in the guest room. Camille hands over a rolled-up cardboard-like paper to Sullivan, and when he opens it he immediately gets emotional. He rests his head on Camille's laps and confesses his love for her like he has done times before. He confesses his desire to stay with her and have kids with her. At night in bed, they express with their bodies what words can't. Sullivan's trip back to Marseille is due in the morning, and he asks Camille if she would love to visit him there. Camille likes the idea but clarifies she'll come only if he wants her around. Sullivan kisses Camille in the likeness of an answer. He's gone by the time she sees the cardboard gift she gave to him earlier, laying carelessly on the floor. She picks it up and tries to catch Sullivan but ultimately misses him. Sullivan makes it back to Marseille where he seems dejected. Lawrence returns home. They are at work when Camille walks up to him and tells him her intention of staying over at her friend's place. Lawrence is displeased as he just got back from his trip and expects to be with her, making up for the time they spend apart. Camille takes her trip and Marseille is the destination. She gets to the train station and finds all trips have been cancelled due to strike action. With no option, she walks down to a roadside bench and sits for a while. She receives a text from Sullivan encouraging her not to be sad because they can't meet up as planned. He promises they will have more time to spend together. Unwilling to go back, Camille lodges in a hotel for a few days. Camille rides her bicycle to meet her mother and casually mentions her uneventful holiday. Her mother uses the moment to open up about her divorce, reflecting on her ex-husband's unpredictable behavior and sharing her relief at their separation. Despite acknowledging his good traits, she expresses his flaws overshadow those good traits. She hands Camille a letter addressed to her, wondering out loud why someone would still send mail to their former home. The letter comes from Sullivan, who mentions he has some difficulties. He details how he constantly sees her face when he's making love to someone else. He further mentions a dream he had of Camille carrying his baby. Their bond is too strong and he doesn't know how to navigate through it. He decided it's too much for him to control and it's best he leaves for good. Camille's mom finds her crying on the floor after reading the letter, but she can't understand why Camille finds it hard to let Sullivan go. Camille goes back to her place but doesn't meet Lawrence at home. She walks around the compound and a little beyond it and finds him seated on some rocks in a secluded and bushy area. She suggests they head to the river. And Lawrence agrees. He, however, asks for a bit of time to finish up before joining her. He advises her to take precautions against snakes and recommends a hat and stick along she should carry along. With her towel, her hat, and stick in hand, Camille makes her way to the river without Lawrence. When she arrives at the riverbank, she dips her legs in the water, enjoying the tranquility of her surroundings. As a gentle breeze blows, her hat is swept into the water. Without much hesitation, she dives in to get it, finding joy in the swim and cherishing the moment of peace.